Good afternoon. My name is Mark Depew. I'm the Director of Oral History at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. Today is Wednesday, July 14th, 2010, and today it's my distinct pleasure to begin, I think is going to be a two-part interview series with Vincent Speranza. Boy, it's almost a tongue twister. Sorry about that, Vince. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. We are here to talk to Vince about his experiences, your experiences, growing up in New York City, specifically in Staten Island, growing up the son of an immigrant family. And we want to spend quite a bit of time talking about that because you've got some important and I think reflective stories about what that was like back in the 1930s and 40s. But the other reason we're here is because, as anybody who's paying close attention can see on your lapel, you've got the Screaming Eagle patch, 101st Airborne, and we'll talk quite a bit about your experiences at Bastogne and then after the war as well. So, Vince, what we always start with is to ask you when and where you were born.
I was born on March 23rd, 1925, on Mulberry Street in Lower Manhattan, the Lower East Side. Considered a pretty tough neighborhood. In fact, they called it Hell's Kitchen. My parents were two Italian kids off the street. You can really see who came here with nothing but the shirts on their backs. They were teenagers in Italy, and their parents brought them here. They didn't know each other back then, but
Were they both from Italy, or I thought
yes.
one was from Sicily?
Well, Sicily is Italy.
Very good.
My mother was from Sicily. My father was from Reggio Calabria. That's right across the Straits of Messina from Sicily. And they didn't meet until they were in New York. We lived on Mulberry Street, and as I said, it was a tough neighborhood, and my mother didn't like it at all. I was number 4 in the family so far. Eventually, there were 8 children. My older brother Joey, then my sister Nancy, and then the twins, Francis and Teresa, and then myself. By the time I was 3 years old, my mother had had enough of the neighborhood, and the clincher was when my older brother Joey got hit in the head with a milk bottle that acquired a bunch of stitches and so on. In those days, by the way, milk bottles were made of heavy glass, and in one of the street altercations, let's say, my mother just said, that's all. And my father, though, the disadvantage for him, we were going to move to Staten Island where my grandmother lived, and she had offered us the upstairs of her house. And my father's job was in Flushing Meadows, Queens. I don't know if that means anything to anybody except New Yorkers, but it's quite a distance. And from Staten Island, at the time when there was no bridge, there was the Staten Island Ferry, only communication between Staten Island and Manhattan, and that meant that if we moved to Staten Island, he would have had to do a 2-hour trip to work every day.
I'm going to back you up here a little bit because I was fascinated when we talked earlier about the story of your father and his brother and how they ended up here in the United States. So talk about, let's go back a generation, if you will.
All right. My father's family came here, and as many of the immigrants who came here in the early 20s, and the 1900s, really, the early 1900s, some of them came here to make a home and so on, but some of them came just to earn enough money to buy a piece of land. That's what they wanted back in the... It was impossible for the peasants, the lower class in Italy, to own any land. They were impoverished and so on. And some of them just wanted to buy a piece of land, come to America, put the whole family to work, make enough money, and go back and then buy a piece of land and live in their homeland. Well, my father's family was one of those. And he came to like the country when they moved here. And when it was time to go back, when the family had earned enough money to go back and buy a piece of land, my father didn't want to go. Neither did his brother, Patsy.
How old were they at the time?
11 and 13. And my father said to his parents, we want to stay in America. And they said, absolutely not. The family goes back. And he said, what? And his father said, listen, the family is going back to Italy. So he didn't say anything. When it was time to get on the ship, the whole family got on board the ship. Just before they took the gangplank down, my father and his brother Patsy ran down the gangplank and disappeared into the crowd. Their parents didn't even know it yet. And they pulled the gangplank down, the ship takes off. And I guess my grandparents there decided what happened to Patsy and Frank. They probably stayed on board. And my father and his brother never looked back. They never wanted to go back to Italy. And now here they are, two boys, 11 and 13. Of course, my father went to the 4th grade and then went to work, and his brother Patsy didn't do much better. So they were already streetwise. They went to the church, the Catholic church, and they told the church that they had no place to go. Their parents had just left and left them, left them ashore by mistake.
Oh, you mean they didn't quite tell the truth to the church?
No, the priest would have been upset, I think. Whatever the story was, they said they asked the priest for asylum or something to eat, place to sleep, and so on. And the priest said, you could stay here for a day or two. He said, but you got to go find a job. And they said, yeah. Well, my father heard that they were hiring on the docks. The ships that were leaving, they were going to San Francisco, and that they were taking on cabin boys. And so my father and his brother signed up. My Uncle Patsy signed up as cabin boys on a ship. And they were sailing from New York to Panama. The canal wasn't ready yet. And then they were going to go overland, catch the ship on the other side, and go to San Francisco. California was to be the place where everybody was going to be rich. And that's what they had in mind. Well, my father said that they weren't out of port 2 or 3 days before his older brother Patsy was in a fight every day, warding off these predators on the ship who thought a cabin boy should be other than a cabin boy. And so he said that they decided as soon as that thing hit Panama, they were going to get off. And they did. And I said, what did you do? How did you earn your money to get back to New York? He said, we sold frankfurters. They went to a hot dog stand and told the man that they were good workers, they'd take them on and so on and so on. And he said, we sold frankfurters because we could eat free. And they stayed on that job until they earned enough money to get passage back to New York.
I assume your brother and uncle were born in Italy, so how well did they speak English at the time?
Well, when they came here, kids pick it up very quickly. My father, by the way, did not have an accent. He spoke English maybe a little, but my Uncle Patsy had a little more of an accent. Maybe he had more trouble with the language, although he was here 2 years. He was 2 years older. But both those men came back to New York. Man, they were boys, and started working for anybody, doing anything. He said one time they were delivering roller skates. Somebody. They didn't know it, but a truck had dropped off a big case of these single-wheel roller skates. Not 4 wheels, 2. And whoever had picked them up brought them home and then sent the boys out to sell them, because it was misappropriated goods, let's say. but the thing was, Pop said it was a job. We made money. We sold them out, and they paid us well. And they took odd jobs and so on. My father took a job when he got old enough as a chauffeur. He got a chauffeur's license, and then the chauffeur car for hire. But the barber shop in those days was more than just a barber shop. It was also the political center. It was a half medical center where the barber used to pull teeth and fix minor cuts and scratches and so on. And my father attended this barber shop, and he said, and by the way, my mother blushes when he tells the story in front of her. He said that I went into the barber shop, and he said, you could see in the back room where the family lived, here's this pretty young girl, and she's dancing. And my father imitates the choo, choo, choo. He says, and my mother always blushes. He says, and I saw her, and I said, ooh. But, you know, in those days you had to ask the father, may you take his daughter out, and with an escort and so on, the chaperone. But whatever the story was, my mother was only 17 years old when she agreed to marry him. And my father was 8 years older than she. And those two people put together a family of 8 kids, and all of us turned out well. The 4 boys all did military service. The girls all married well, and we must have, because we all had good jobs and so on and so on. And you have to admire a couple of people who, no background, no education, and no job skills. My mother worked in a candy factory where she dipped chocolates, cherries, chocolate cherries. And my father just did our jobs until he got a job at R.H. Macy. And that's when I was telling you about when we moved to Staten Island. It meant that his job now in this warehouse in Queens out in Long Island took him 2 hours to get there, and a half hour you got to be there early to change your clothes and so on. So he was 2.5 hours to go to work, 2.5 hours to come home.
I wonder if we can show the one slide that we've got of your parents, and it's next to a map of Staten Island.
Okay.
My understanding, and you can tell me how wrong I am on this one, but if you lived in Staten Island and your dad had to go to Queens, he had to go through Brooklyn to get to the Queens?
No, you had to go through Manhattan. You take he took 2 buses from where we lived in Mariners Harbor. He took a bus to an exchange, then you got to get on another bus, and that bus took you to the Staten Island Ferry. Okay?
Okay.
The Staten Island Ferry used to run every half hour. During rush hour, it runs more often, but it takes 25 minutes to get across to Manhattan. And then in Manhattan, you take the subway, the IRT subway, to Chambers Street, where you switch over to an express, which stops at City Hall, and then you take the train all the way up to the Bronx and Queens, and finally it goes out to Flushing Meadows, Long Island. And it took him 2.5 hours to work and 2.5 hours back each day. We saw him a little bit in the evening. He got up and went to work before anybody else got up. He came home 7 o'clock, 7:30, and just in time for a meal, bottle of wine, and and my job was to make sure that when he got down, sit down to eat, that he had a full bottle of wine. And the wine, you know, we used to make our own. I had to go down 3 flights of steps, and I was little, and the bottle, the wine barrel had a spigot and a funnel, and my father gave strict orders. You never fill the bottle up to the top, only to the bottom of the neck, because the wine has to breathe. You understand, Vinny? And I'd say, yes, Pop. He'd say, you fill it up to here. So I'd go down there and fill up the thing there. Now, I'm a little kid. I'd climb up the stairs there with that bottle to make sure that nothing breaks. Well, one day I went down there, and I wasn't paying attention, and the wine went right up to the top of the bottle. And I said, ooh, ooh. And I remember this so clearly. I looked all around as though some idea is going to come from out of the woodwork. So I
knew that was coming.
I drank it down to the level where it was supposed to be. And At first, you know, I didn't feel anything different. I put the cork in and started up the stairs. I get up the stairs, and my mother tells this later. She said, "Here comes this little kid with a bottle, and he's going, ooh, ooh." He hands me the bottle, and then drops down on the floor and slides under the table and goes to sleep. When she used to tell the story later, she'd say, "I panicked." I said, "What's the matter?" Did he just... I went over there, she said, and I smelled the wine. And I said, "Already at this age, you're drunk." But that was a story that, you know, made the rounds of the family for years and years and years and years.
Why didn't the family move to Queens instead of Staten Island?
Okay, now that's a good question, and I was going to address that anyway, because the story came up. They built in Queens some city housing that was very reasonable and very close to his job. And city housing meant, you know, that they would give you a good apartment for really, you know, a good low rental. And they made sure you had enough room for all your kids and so on. And so my father announced to the family, "Hey, I'm going to move to Queens. They just opened up this apartment. I can qualify," and so on and so on. All the kids started crying. My sister, "No, I'm going to leave my friends at the high school." My brother said, "I just got a good job, Pop," and so on. So everybody, all the kids started moaning, and Mom didn't want to leave either because her mother lived downstairs, and she was sickly. Mom was taking care of her. She kept saying no. Pop said, "But gee, look at that, I can get to work in 20 minutes. But you know, the measure of a man, he was willing to sacrifice himself and so that the kids could stay in their schools. My mother could still take care of her mother and so on. He said, "No, if somebody had to sacrifice." You know, that was never lost on me. I hope I've patterned my life on that concept. What the family means and what you need to do, what your responsibility is with the family. But the next thing that came up about moving was he heard that in Alaska the Homestead Act was still in effect, and that you could get 40 acres, and if you built something on it and occupied it for 5 years, it was yours, free and clear. The Homestead Act was still, by the way, I think the Homestead Act is still in effect today. But we'd sit at the table, everybody all around sitting there, and Papa would say, "Now listen, how about we all go to Alaska?" You should see the look on my mother's face. She's saying, "Another crazy idea." He'd go around, "Pop, you want to go?" My sisters, my brother. I said, "Pop, I'll go with you." He'd say, "All right, Vinny, we go you and me. None of you want to come?" I said, "Pop, we got to have a gun." "Oh, yeah." He said, "Well, we're going to shoot animals." And my mother used the beautiful phrase. She said, "Hey, vayete da mare," which in Italian means, "Hey, go dunk yourself in the sea." There wasn't going to be any move to Alaska, but you know, I don't think my father was really serious about it. But he and I, from that moment on, he and I buddied up, and I think I was his favorite, because from there on in, he figured I was the only one who was going to support him on anything he wanted to do.
About what age were you at that time then?
Oh, I was a freshman in high school.
Okay.
Maybe 15.
So that's well into the Depression era as well.
Yes. Now, we were poor. Everybody was poor. You know, anybody who says, "Oh, how terrible it must have been during the Depression," maybe it was for some people, but as far as we were concerned, hey, there was enough to eat. We had clothes on our back. We had a place to stay. My mother made sure everybody always stayed clean and healthy and so on and so on. And all of us were in the same boat. There was nobody in the neighborhood who was any better off than anybody else. And so we didn't know what it meant to be poor.
the Macy's that your father worked at, is that the Macy's of the...
Yes, R.H. Macy's, but it was their warehouse. R.H. Macy's on 34th Street in Manhattan, the store.
Right.
This is the warehouse that supplies their overseas shipments.
Do you have any idea how much money your dad was making in that job?
When my father started that job, during the Depression, he made $8 a week. And this was before the union, and why I'm such a good union man now, I always have been, because he was making $8 a week, and until the bridge, the Staten Island Ferry, it cost him 40 cents a day to go to work. And so you can see what happens there. But of course now all the boys, the 4 boys, as soon as you're age 12, you go get your working papers. During those days you were allowed to get part-time working papers where you could work 20 hours a week at age 12. When you're age 14, you can get working papers for full-time work. And a lot of people pulled their kids out of school after age 14, after elementary school. That was enough, and they sent them to work. My father did not want us to do anything like that. Part-time jobs, okay, he said, but all of you are going to graduate from high school, go to high school. And so on the some of these things now, all the boys then had to do whatever they could to contribute to the family pot. Now, I got a job at age 12 after school from 3 to 6 every day. Saturday from 7:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. Sunday from 9 to 1. And my pay was $1.25 a week. Of course, you know, the money was worth a lot more then. But I had a bicycle, which my brother bought for $2 in a junkyard and put it together, and it went down. All 4 of the boys used that bicycle. And I was a delivery boy. But then on a Saturday, I had to wash the refrigerator down, sweep the floors, and clean and this. To this day, I hate cleaning. But the job was, but when you could come home at the end of the week and plunk $1.25 down on the table, when your father's only making 8, you're making a difference. And my older brother and the jobs he did, he put $2, $3 on the table. Hey, we were helping, and it made a difference. Until the union got in, and when in my father's warehouse there, and then his salary went up to $12 a week, and that was a big difference. That's 50% more. My mother would give me the quarterback, and with the 25 cents, I took my brother and I to the movies. The movies were 10 cents each then. You saw 2 features, cowboy serials, Flash Gordon, the news. But 10 cents a piece, and go to Woolworths, and for a nickel you get a bag of candy like this, and we'd sit down all day and eat the movies. But in growing up like that, where you realized early what it meant to make $1, I've never regretted that. I think that has helped me all of my life to handle my finances right. We started with nothing, and we're fairly well off today. And so how did you do that? Well, you work hard and so on. Nobody gave you anything. But you were trained early on about what it takes to make money, how to spend it wisely, how to save some of it, and so on and so on, until, the early Depression training in all areas was an excellent education. You take prejudice. We had everything in our neighborhood. Italians, Irish, German, Polish, blacks, Jews, you name it. There was even a couple of guys from India. But all the kids, we were all in the same boat, and so nobody paid any attention to if you got a better looking shirt than I have, and the hospitality of all the people. No matter who was with you, if it's time to eat, hey, come on, sit down at the table and eat. So half of the time when you come home, if your two friends are with you, they sit down and eat with you. They could have been German, they could have been anything. Nobody paid any attention. And I learned early that, hey, really, there's no difference. He feels the same things I do, and if he gets hurt, I'm over there helping him. If I get hurt, he's over there helping me. And we learned early on that hey, trying to judge people by color or religion or something, absolutely foolish, because we know better. We've seen it growing up.
What language did you speak at home?
Now, my father insisted on everybody speaking English at all times. They said, we're Americans. You understand that this and that. And in fact, the kids were embarrassed to hear Italian spoken in the house, except when, now there were two other parts of the family. In Brooklyn, there was the La Rosas. That's my mother's sister, and her husband and their 5 kids and so on.
What was your mother's name then before she was married?
Frances Paratrooper. But her sister married Joe La Rosa. So that's the La Rosas. In Queens, there was the Adabos. And boy, what stories I could tell you about my Uncle Dominic. The Adabos lived in Queens, and there was 3 kids there, and my Uncle Dominic and his wife Anna. Now, I'll switch to them briefly because this is a real story. My Uncle Dominic came here as a kid. He was from Bari. He was Barese, from Bari, Italy, and he was apprenticed to a baker. In those days, the family was only too happy to get their kids to be an apprentice. At age 7, the boss takes you in, he feeds you, clothes your house, he teaches you the trade. When you're 14, you can leave, 7 years later. And from there on in, now you can become a journeyman and then a master.
And
7
what
years.
again?
A journeyman is next from 14 and 7 to 21.
What was the craft?
The last one is master. It could be any craft.
Okay.
Any craft. This was the medieval, a holdover from
Sure.
the medieval period in Europe. And he said, I hated it. You got to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You got to go make the bread and so on. And he said, then I had to take a basket and put the bread in there and go down the village, and everybody hollering, and from the upstairs they throw a rope down and with a basket, and you put the bread in there, and then they call it up, and then they don't send the money down, and you got to go up and holler. But whatever it is, he said he didn't want to be a baker. Do not want to be a baker. He said, I'm going to America. As soon as he was 14 and he finished his apprenticeship, he said to his parents, I'm going to America. They said, oh, no, you're not. He said, I'm going to America. I can do better there. I can get a job. And they said, no. They said, you got nobody there. You have no family. You don't know anybody. How would you make out? And don't forget, there's this part of America there where people take advantage of you and so on and so on. He said, I'm going to America as soon as I save up enough money. And he did. Saved up enough money, came to America. The first job he got was in the coal mines. He was recruited right off the docks, the coal mines of West Virginia. And he said, the Irish were 1 generation ahead of us. And he said all the bosses were Irish. And of course they called us wops and guineas and dagos, and when we asked for more wood to prop up the mine, they'd say, wops are cheaper than props. We'd do it without it, and so on. And he said, I didn't say anything because, they didn't pay you in money. They paid you in scrip that you could only cash at the company store. He said, and you never had enough. You owed them for this, you owed them for that, you owed them for your food. You never had enough to save us, put aside, to get away. So he said, and one time he said, I broke my leg. I said, what did you do? He said, in those days, he said, there's no welfare, there's no unemployment, there's no, if you can't work, out. They throw you out. So I said, did they throw you out? He said, no. He said, I told him I would work as a bookkeeper for half pay until my leg mends. I said, a bookkeeper? He said, half pay, they took me on. I said, did you know anything about a bookkeeper? He said, no. He said, but I look what the guy over here does, and then I did the same thing. Now, folks, here's the shocker in this story. My Uncle Dominic's son, Joseph Adabo, went to college, became a lawyer, and was elected to Congress. 26 years, Congressman Joe Adabo from Queens, New York, with that family and that background. Only in America. Only in America. And Joe Adabo, he died early. He had liver cancer, but my cousin was a good congressman. At any rate, the things that we did that I lament today, that the kids with their, you know, with electronics and their things there, so on and so on, are missing out on going out in the woods and looking for a slingshot. We're going to make a slingshot. By the way, you know, the inner tube, the inner tire tube,
Right.
was the mainstay of all childhood activities for boys. And the greatest crime in America was when they invented the tubeless tire, because we had more uses for these old tire tubes and so on. You go out in the woods, you have to cut a fork of a tree, and then peel it down and so on and so on. And then you take, you get your mother's permission to put it in the oven so that it bakes and dries the thing out. And then everybody had a pocket knife, and you cut a notch in the two forks up here, and cut long strings of rubber bands from the tube. Then you had to find an old shoe and take the tongue of the shoe, and cut the square of the tongue, make a slot here and here, and you tie the rubber to the slingshot, the other end to the leather piece here, and now you have a. And pity the poor ladies who had pebble driveways, because the pebbles were perfect slingshot ammunition. And we used to go raid those. We used to go raid those driveways and put pebbles in your pocket and run, and the lady come out and so on. And then there was the putty blower season. There was a certain reed that grew down near the brooks, and you could get a section about this long if you cut it, and just hollow out the knob here, and it was a, what do they call them now? I don't know. We call them putty blowers. And then before the cherries get ripe, when the little cherries are green and small, we go raid the cherry trees, pull off all those greens, and then you put a handful in your mouth, and of course we'd take them to school, and of course the teachers would fan us good if she caught us with it, but every once in a while, if you could get away with it in school,
So you had all kinds of creative ways to get yourself in trouble, didn't you?
Yeah. And then the time that we used to get a pair of new sneakers every summer, my mother and father had a thing about barefoot. My wife tells me that down south, they couldn't wait for summertime to go barefooted. They'd like to go barefoot, and I guess there's a lot of people today that like to go barefooted. To my parents, barefootedness meant poverty. They said, a man that can't even afford to buy shoes for his kids' feet is a poor excuse for a man. And so they would never let us go barefooted. So in the summertime, you put your school shoes away, and we bought a pair of sneakers, 89 cents, Keds, sneakers. And they had just tarred the road in front of my house. The road was not paved in front of my house when I was a kid. But they had paved it, and they tarred it. And I had my new sneakers on. And I had this brilliant idea that if I could put a nice layer of tar under my sneakers, that they would last twice as long or 3 times as long. And I went out there and I stuck my feet in that tar and I wiggled it around, and then I went running home proud of that, and I opened the door and I hollered for Mom, and I started walking down the hall, and I'm tracking taller than him. My mother looked at me and she said, "What did you do?" I said, "Mom, my sneakers are going to last forever." I got a whack. I, g- I felt so hurt. I thought I was doing something good. I had to go take a brush and kerosene and sit down on the grass and take those sneakers and scrub all that tar off, and crying all the time that how unfair. Here I was doing everybody a favor, making my sneakers last longer, and I got a smack instead. At any rate, the things that we did, we played tickly bump in the wintertime where the brook is frozen, the ice, and the leader picks out a spot and he runs and jumps 1 foot bang on the ice and to the shore. And every man has to follow in his footsteps. And eventually, you know, whoever the unlucky guy is going to be, the ice goes down and whoosh, you're in ice water. Up to your ankles, sometimes up to the knees, depending on how deep the brook was that year. But tickly bum then required that whoever got wet, we had to build a fire and dry him off. Because you can't send him home that way, he'll get in trouble. In those days, the problem was not, did you get hurt or something, did you tear your clothes? Did you make a rip in your pants? Because that's worse than getting hurt. And you learned to sew, by the way, so you sewed that up before your mother came home and try to hide it.
Was your
I still know how to sew. I still know how to sew because I had to learn early.
the hard way, huh?
But you know, I could tell you a million stories like that, but we I want to move on, I guess.
Well, it sounds like you had a fun childhood, and you mentioned already you didn't really understand that you were poor because probably
No.
everybody else was.
No.
Was the family religious?
In this manner, my father made sure that all of us went to church, but he didn't. He went like the 3 times a year to Catholic, Easter, Christmas, and New Year's. And now my mother she went to church. But we never understood that other than he said, "Hey, I work hard all week and so on. Sunday's the only day I've got to relax and so on." And we accepted that, you know. But we did not, we never discussed it really. You know, Mom had paintings, you know, of Jesus and so on. And in the bedroom, there's always the cross, Jesus on the cross. And but we all had to dress up very nicely and bring your. The boys had a nickel to donate. The girls didn't donate. And at the end of the mass, the priest, his name was Father Toroni, came out and he'd have a box of bonbons. And the boys got in line and he'd say, "Come here. What was the homily? What did I say?" And if you knew it, you got a bonbon. If you didn't, you get boom on top back of the head. Next. He got our attention. He used to get our attention. Yeah, you know, things were so simple in those days, and nobody was worried about lawsuits. And you know, you did something wrong. Any adult there who saw you doing something wrong, pat you on the bottom and so on. Any adult in the neighborhood, they all felt responsible for. They all felt responsible for each other's kids, and well, and if somebody got hurt, by the way, the whole neighborhood was down there. It was really. And let me tell you something else. Let me reflect on something today. I've lived in big cities all my life, you know, New York, but then when I retired, I went to a small town in Florida, and I worked for a while in Springfield before I retired, and that was a smaller town. I now live in a real small town, Auburn. I think 4,400 people. I've been there 10 years now, and I'm enjoying so much the old-time small-town atmosphere. It's really true. The people do care more about each other. The people do really concern themselves with helping if somebody, and I just like the attitude that I'm hearing now. For a person who's lived in big cities most of his life, it's a refreshing change. And I feel it makes me a better person in that I want to fit into the town, and so I try to adopt the same attitudes and so on that they do, and I'm happy about the whole thing. Now, getting back to growing up, when I went to elementary school, I must have had some kind of talent because I was in all the plays, all the school plays. And I was in the 6th grade. The 8th grade always puts on an annual show before graduation, a play of some kind. They invite the community, and they make money for the school. Whatever the proceeds were went to the school. And I was asked from the 6th grade to come up and play because they wanted somebody to play with. The play was Hansel and Gretel. And my whole family was in it. My sister was one of the witches. My brother was one of the Sandmen. I was Hansel, and the 8th graders there were the other lead. And we put on a play. We put on several nights, and we made good money for the school. And if I was in the 6th grade, that was about 1930. Let's see. I started school at age 6, 25, 31, probably 1937, 38, somewhere in there. And just recently, going through a whole bunch of old stuff, I come across a little newspaper clip. I should show it to you. It says, and the students of PS 22 put on a school play, Hansel and Gretel, a big success. Really is. They earned $117,000, $117, and the leads were Gretel was Myra Hansen. Hansel was Vincent Speranza. Now, that thing has to be 70 years old, 80 years old,
Yeah.
75 years old, whatever the story is. How in the world did that survive all my moves and so on, and remind me about something I had forgotten about for a long time? At any rate, I enjoyed elementary school. I was a good student. They had a contest. Vincent, we want you to recite poetry. I said, you know, the teacher says so, you do it. So they picked out a poem, and every once in a while, I think back and I say, you know what? I'll bet you I can remember one or two stanzas of that poem. I won the contest. The 6 men of Hindustan. To 6 men of Hindustan, who learning much inclined, who went to see an elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. The first one happening to fall against the broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, God bless me, but this elephant is very like a wall. The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, Ho, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp, to me 'tis mighty clear, this wonder of an elephant is very like a spear. And then it goes on and on for 6 more. I forgot the rest of it. But
I'm amazed you can remember that part.
but it came back to me. You know, look, I'm 85 now. I forget an awful lot of things, but there are some things that you just can't. They're as clear as a bell. I remember standing on the stage, saying, reciting this poem, and winning the contest. I had a little medal thing that they gave me, and you know, it makes you feel so good that you succeed, and I, you know, always later on in life try hard to be a good student because, you know.
Well, and then you spent your life as a teacher, which we'll get to. I want to ask you a couple of questions. We do have to move on here a little bit, but there's a couple things that we talked about before, I think, that really illustrate what life was like in your family and at that time during in the United States as well. And one of them dealt with a can of beef.
Ah, yes. Okay. By now, you're getting a little feel for the character of my father. He was a proud man, not well educated, but he was the smartest man I ever knew, and a man who willing to do everything necessary to take care of his family. Well, during the Depression, the government came out with a program called Home Relief, and they had certain cans of food and so on that were marked Home Relief, not to be sold. This one was tinned beef, canned beef. My neighbor brought one over to my mother's home, and Mom took the can. Oh, thank you very much, and she put it on the shelf. My father came home from work, and as he walked by, he sees this on the shelf. He says, "Francie, come here." He's talking to my mother. He said, "What's this?" She said, "The neighbor brought," he said. "And you took it?" She said, "Yeah." He said, "Hey, bring it back and say thank you very much, but you know," he said, "I take care of this family." He took it to the bathroom. By the way, the bathroom was off the kitchen in our apartment. And we kids are all sitting out there wondering what, you know, when Pop goes in there into the bathroom, that's the only private place in there with Mom. So we're all scared and listening, and we hear him raise his voice a little bit, and he says, "I don't want ever to see anything like that in this house again. If you need more money," said, "I'll go get another job and I'll pay and we'll buy. And if you need more, I'll get another job. But we don't take charity." Do you understand that? Well, now we hear this through the door, and yeah, we're afraid there's something more is going to happen. But all he did was admonish her that he was embarrassed and insulted by her accepting charity from the neighbor next door. He said, "That's from the government." Now, if the neighbor was bringing you some vegetables or something, and that's different. That's not the government program telling us that we can't take care of ourselves. What a lesson for today's welfare people. But at any rate, we had that drummed into us from early on. You want something? Go do it.
Yeah. Another story that really gets to the self-sufficiency that your father obviously approached life with was the whole experience of making wine every year.
That's a story, yeah. That's a story in itself. First of all, you know, we weren't the only one in the neighborhood. Everybody, all the Italian families anyway, made wine. And the traditions from the old country held here in how you make wine and what you do and it's a family affair. Everybody is involved. In the fall, let's see, the grapes, June, July, they were California grapes, but whenever it was, late summer, I guess. But my father had 3 big barrels, you know, wine barrels, and he'd bring them out to the yard, and I'm his, you know, second-hand man now. I'm his buddy. "Vinny, come here." Now, you get the hose, and you fill up these barrels, you know, from the bung here, and swish them around, and then put them on 2 pieces of 2x4 and turn them over and let them drain. Wash them all good. "And tomorrow we'll take it." I said, "Okay." So I go out there and I do my job. Next day he says, "Now, here's 10 cents. Go to the hardware store and tell him you want 3 sticks of Sicilian sulfur." Understand? Now he says, "Look, It's got to say Sicily on it. If it doesn't say Sicily, I don't want it. You understand? 10 cents will be enough. 3 sticks of Sicily sulfur. We go buy the sulfur. I'd go buy the sulfur, come back, and I say, now what do you do with it, Pop? You take a piece of wire, make a hole in the stick, light it with a match, and hang it inside the barrel with the wire hanging onto the side there until that stick burns itself out inside the barrel for each barrel. And I asked him what he did, what that did. He said it purifies the wine. You know, later on in years, we questioned all these things, but only to ourselves. If we didn't understand it, so what? That's the way he made wine, and his wine was always good. It was always praised. Everybody in the neighborhood liked my father's wine. That did something to the wine, but it had to say Sicily on it. No other sulfur would come. He then, on a Saturday, Ralph is going to come around with a truck, and he's got the grapes from California that he offloaded from a railroad car. And then he goes around the neighborhood selling boxes of grapes, white grapes and red grapes. The boxes are made of a whitish wood. And Ralph comes up, and he takes out several boxes of each kind and lays them there. And then all of us are sitting on the porch watching, but then my father comes out, and only the boys behind him. He goes out in front of the truck, and now he and Ralph have to negotiate. They light their pipes. How are the grapes this year? Well, the grapes, you know, this year it is. And the other guy lights his pipe, and they puff on a little bit. What are they getting in California for grapes this year? Oh, $1, 2 cents. Oh, no, that can't. Ralph says, well, but you know, this year the grapes, they got more. My father says, come la tintura. How is the tincture? And they say, the red one. They take a grape and smash it up against the white wood. And then the stain that grape leaves on the wood tells them about the content, and whether the wine is going to require more grapes or less grapes. You know, I didn't understand it, but they did. And he and Ralph would talk and talk, and finally they agree. And Ralph says, okay, finito, we're finished negotiating. Time's up. And your father goes like this to the boys. And the boys go down, put the boxes of grapes on there, take them down to the basement where there's a big grinder. Now, everybody's got a job. My mother and all the women are washing bottles and washing corks and steaming corks and so on. The littlest kids are picking the leaves out of the boxes of grapes. The bigger kids are dumping the grapes into the hopper. And the big boys, my older brother Joey and me, we grind the grapes and put them in the barrels and put them in the press. And when you finish grinding all the grapes, my father puts a big, heavy, thick blanket called a cutunina on top. Then every day when he comes home from work, down the basement, puts his ear to the barrel. Now, in other days, and I will accompany him. I go down there. I couldn't hear anything or know anything, but Pop's doing it.
He has to be listening to something.
So, well, when it starts to bubble, you know, when the wine starts to ferment, you can hear it. It really. And so when the time comes that he hears a certain sound, okay, tonight, cancel everything, everybody, down the basement. And that's the night when they pour the first squeezings. The first squeezings is the best way. And then the rest of it is put in we call it rashina. That's the stems and the things that they put in a press. And you have a big wooden bar and you keep pressing. That's the second squeezing of the grapes. And then you take that stuff that's been pressed, throw it back in there, put water in it. La Quada was the ladies' drink. It's just a wine, wine, or whatever you want to call it, that would come out of the holdings there, and we take them back. But the best wine was saved for the family and the family company and so on. Strangers that you're offering a drink to, the secondary wine's okay. The third wine, you know, you just leave that to give to the kids and the women who can't drink full strength wine. But my father must have been very successful at it because everybody praised his wine. And my Uncle Dominic was just the opposite. Every time we went to his house to drink a glass of wine, it tasted like vinegar. In fact, my mother one time threatened to bring home a bottle of it to use as vinegar. But, you know, nobody would insult him and say anything. We drank it, whatever it was. But his was terrible. And my Uncle Joe, who lived in an apartment in Brooklyn, had a friend who down in the basement made wine alongside the bakery. So they used to go down there and get fresh bread right out of the oven and a glass of wine. And by the way, that's what they used to feed babies in Italy. When they first started eating solid food, they'd take bread, just dip it in wine. And a story alongside of that is my sister and her husband, first kid was terrible. Cry all the time, moan. He had belly aches. By the way, the kid ended up becoming a doctor. He and his brother both became doctors. But he was a terrible kid. Now we're at a wedding, and my poor sister and her husband have to sit there because the kid will not sit still. He won't. He's still, you know, babe in arms, and they couldn't. And so I'm single then. I walk over there. I've been drinking beer. I walk over there and I said, "Hey, listen, you two go ahead out there and dance. I'll take care of the baby." They said, "Nah, Vinny's crying," and so on. I said, "That's all right. I'll take care of him. I know how to take care of kids. I've been taking care of him since I was 8. So they said, "Gee, we'd like it. Thank you." They went out there and started dancing. I had a glass of wine. I stuck my finger in the wine, opened the kid's mouth. They come back from the dance. They said, "Oh, what did you do? How nice you got him to sleep." I said, "Yes, he fell asleep." I said, "That's superior courage."
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to change gears on you.
Okay.
I'm wondering what was on the table for Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners.
R.H. Macy and Company gave each of their employees a turkey for Thanksgiving, free, and you got a bird the size of proportional to your family. Like my father had a big family, he got one of the biggest turkeys around. People with smaller families got smaller turkeys, but my mother used to put sausage stuffing, breadcrumbs, the chicken livers. And I don't even remember what everything that was in there. All I know is that was the most delicious turkey you ever tasted. And sweet potatoes. And my grandfather grew, you know, we're at my grandfather's house, pears. And she did something with the fruit too. I don't know what it was, but there was always lots to eat, plenty to eat, and everybody, you know, got their fill. It was not like the old joke that they used to tell about this family that company's coming. There's a big family. They got 10 kids, and the company's coming, and they've only got 1 chicken. And so the mother says to the kids, "Now listen, the company's coming. We got to give the chicken to the company. When I ask you, you want any chicken? You say, 'No, thanks, Ma.' You say, 'I would chicken.' You say, 'No, thanks, Ma.' Understand? Everybody, refuse the chicken. We'll give it to the company." Then afterwards, you know, the dessert and stuff. So the kids said, okay. They were done. The company comes, and the mother hands out some. "You want any chicken?" The kid says, "No." "You want chicken?" "No." "Chicken?" "No." So she gives the chicken out to the adults. So afterwards, now the kids are already sitting there. The dessert comes out on the table, and the kid says, "We'll have some dessert." Mother says, "Hey, You didn't eat any chicken, you don't get any dessert. That's the kind of jokes that used to be, you know, told apropos of the times. But we, as a family, now, you know, there were arguments, but they didn't last long because justice was swift in those days. My older brother was more the master of the house than my father, in that my father wasn't there. Of course, my father's rules were applied, and he made sure that he backed up my mother's discipline at all times. But my brother, you know, how I wish that man was still around. What a wonderful guy he was. When it came time to figuring out how to make a little extra money and so on, he pulled me out of bed. Now, I'm just a little kid. He pulled me out of bed and say, come on, we're going, it's still dark outside. Come on, we're going to the farms. What for? Shut up and get in there. He's got a bicycle, puts me on the crossbar of the bicycle, takes me to the farms. He asked my mother for 50 cents. Her mama said, 50 cents? What are you going to do with it? She said, Mom, said, it'll come back multiplied. So she gave me the 50 cents. We go to the farms. There were a lot of truck farms on Staten Island, growing all kinds of vegetables. When the buyers would buy up all the produce, there's still like odd bundles left, or scrap, or some pieces and so on. And my brother, for 50 cents, would pile his wagon up with all kinds of vegetables and fruit and so on that were left from the piles. Now he's got me on the bicycle, he's pulling the wagon in the back, and this place is about 6 miles away. But go back home, then he sits down and bundles everything up, make it attractive. Yes, he's got the carrots like this and the celery like this, all bundled with the spaghetti string and so on. And when he's got everything all clean, he takes me in the house, puts on a clean pair of shorts. Now in those days, you didn't wear long pants until you were 14 and you made your communion confirmation. You were allowed shorts, knickers at the most. But he took a new pair of shorts, and you know what a Buster Brown collar looks like? Yeah, a shirt with a Buster Brown collar, right? Wash my face, he'd comb my hair. He'd stand in front of me, look, and I'd look all clean, so on. He said, now, come here. We're going to go through the neighborhood. You go to that house over there, and you hold it, and you say to the lady, lady. He says, ma, lady, don't you want this nice bunch of carrots? Only 5 cents. So I'd say, lady, no. You got to say, lady. He said, what he made me practice until I had the right pathos in my voice and the right look on my face and so on. We made out like bandits. The 50 cents became $5. We sold out the whole thing in the neighborhood, and he did that several Saturdays in a row when the farms are doing that kind of produce. On other Saturdays, which is the Jewish holy day, there was a Jewish cemetery near our neighborhood, and he'd get a big square can of water and 2 little pieces of carpet and digging tools. And then he'd dress us all up, and now he looks at me and he says, now listen this time, no smiling, you understand? No smiling. Sad face. Go to the cemetery. We stand behind the mourners who were standing at the graves, you know, and they're praying and right? And then when they get finished praying, they see it. We go over there, put the carpet down on the thing, kneel on it, and dig up the flowers around the grave and so on and so on and so on. Then you step back, you take your hat off, and you wait, and they give you a quarter, dime, 50 cents or so on, depending on. You'd go home with a pocket full of money, just sitting around doing graves for the people around there, and he always knew how to make an honest dollar, and he taught us early on. You know, look, you may have to. Not apologize, but you may have to act subservient if the occasion calls for it. Not slavery, but certainly if you're working, you want to work for somebody else, you want to get paid for working for somebody else, you got to act like you're willing to work for somebody else. And you know, all the boys were impressed with that. All the jobs we got, we all did well in them because I think we had that attitude. Hey, man's giving you a day's pay, you do a day's work, and you do it right, and you'll be a better man for it.
Vince, you mentioned earlier that your father very much wanted you guys to identify yourselves as Americans. I'm wondering, as you got into the later years of the 1930s, if your parents and the other relatives in the family were paying attention to what was going on in Italy with Mussolini and the fascists, and if they talked about any of that.
Okay, I'll give you an oblique answer, and then I'll come to the main question. In 1994, my brother Joey and I finally decided if we're ever going to see Italy, we better go now. We're 75 years old, and so on. We better go. And we tried to talk our wives, and they didn't want to come. They said, no, you two go and get it, then come back. Next time we'll all go, but you figure out the best places to go, and so on and so on. So my brother and I played the harmonica and he played the guitar. So I said, hey, we take the harmonica and the guitar, we'll make music over there too. And he said, we're not full. I said, yeah, listen. I said, you know, because he and I love to play with together. I have about a 2-hour tape of he and I fooling around playing it with the harmonica and the guitar. And he said, okay, but he said, I got to buy a small guitar. I can't. To make a long story short, we took the harmonica and guitar, and I've got video of all of this that I had taken while we were there. And every place we went, we sat down, we made music. We started even on the plane. On the plane, we're fooling around. He took the thing down. We're by ourselves in 2 seat corners. And the stewardess came over and we said, oh, yeah, we'll put them on. No, she said, they think it's great, play some more. So now when we were in Italy, we'd go to these little piazzas, you know, when we're walking and sit down on a bench and we start to play. Now the songs that we knew, Italian songs that we knew, were the Italian of 60 years ago. 60 years from then. Because my grandfather, who taught us some of it, and my father and mother and so on, when they came, those songs were old songs already, and so on and so on. Well, we're sitting on the piazza and we're playing all these beautiful songs, Torna a Sorrento, My Way Maria, Come Stai Te, Sul Mare Luccica. And then we would go into Giovenezia, Primavera, Mussolino. The people go, oh, no, signore, queste sono I cose dei fascisti. And we'd say, what are you talking about? These are songs my father, we don't know. No, signore, don't play anymore. We act innocent and say, oh. In other words, when before the war, my grandfather thought Mussolini was great. That he made the trains run on time, that he took Italy out of poverty, and that built up, especially Sicily, where the most impoverished part of Italy, and they were sort of, you know, supportive until Mussolini came down on the other side of the war. They expected him to come down like in the First World War with the British and the French. But when he came in on the other side, now everybody's ashamed and embarrassed. There were people in New York whose name was Mussolini. They went to the courts and had their names changed. But the thing still was that most people had relatives there, and they're wondering if their sons are going to go bomb their relatives and so on and so on. And the question never came up, but I know that that was something they used to discuss. You know, what happens? What are you going to do if they tell you to go bomb? You go bomb. Hey, I'm an American, so are you.
Well, the Italians were already into some places like Ethiopia before this, but 1939, September of 1939, is when the Germans invaded Poland. Was that something that was caught the attention of the family?
Here's what we knew of our parents' political views and so on and so on. My mother didn't know, care, or was concerned about Martha. She was a focus on the family. That was her entire life. My father would only discuss politics when my uncles came over for those weekend visits, and then the men there would talk about the things. And we had one uncle who I think was given that kind of warning. Hey, you know what's happening? The dictatorships are they're going, but too many, and my father was one of them, felt, nah, they'll never go that far. They'll never go into war against this. But then, as soon as they did, everybody clammed up. Nobody talked about it anymore. While I was home anyway. Now, of course, I left in '43. I don't know what they talked about.
Did the relatives kind of clam up on the war because that Italy was on the wrong side of this?
Exactly. They were always so proud of their heritage, but now their heritage is stained with dictatorships and fascists and picking on. There was a song. A testa nera, l'Abyssinia, e Mussolini, where Mussolini went to Abyssinia when they invaded Abyssinia, and this was like a patriotic song. See, now we've also taken the blacks in Testa Nera, blackheads, and in Abyssinia. That means now we're an empire, we got a colony and so on. Later perspective makes you see these kind of things. At the time, there wasn't much. In fact, the United States was getting to be pretty isolationist. They didn't want, when they saw these war things coming, they said, we're going to stay out of this one. Look at the last one. We lost 158,000 men. What did we get out of it? Nothing. They wouldn't even get the League of Nations set up, and the Congress at that time said, no. They turned Wilson down. They said, no, we're not going to be part of that. All it's going to do is going to get us into another war, and we got nothing out of it. We went into the war expecting that Wilson's 14 points were going to be the things that the war was settled on. And the 14 points set up a really nice world. No more secret, no armed forces, and open covenants, openly arrived at. And America at that time was saying, this is what I could glean from it as a high school student. No, we're not going to get involved in this one. We haven't been attacked. Nobody's bothering us. And if you want to trade cash and carry, you bring your ships over here and load the goods on it, pay cash, and send it back. Because none of you ever paid your debts to us except Finland, I think, after the First World War. There was a comedian named Eddie Cantor. He was a Jewish guy, but at that time they didn't know what the Nazis were doing to the Jews. And he had a radio program. He was in Hollywood too. And on Sunday nights, he used to sing. If they feel like a war on some foreign shore, let them keep it over there. If some fools want to fight and they think might makes right, let them keep it over there. From coast to coast you'll hear a million doughboys cheer. Our job is to protect our loved ones over here. We're for you, Uncle Sam, but stay out of the jam. Let them keep it over there. And everybody would applaud. No, we're not going to get into this war.
Well, that all changed on December 7th, and you were,
Absolutely.
I think, 16 years old at the time. Tell us about your memories of Pearl Harbor then.
Oh my goodness. I was on a bicycle pedaling to a Greek restaurant to buy hot dogs. It was a Sunday. My family, the family kids, it all chipped in. Some of my older brothers and sisters had the money. And they were going to buy everybody these special hot dogs. This Greek restaurant made special, terrific hot dogs with sauerkraut and everything else. So I'm on the bicycle, and I'm in the Greek restaurant. And in there, I hear the radio. And I'm saying, what are they talking about? They said, this and this and this and this, and they're talking about. And I must have said it out loud. I said, what are they talking about? He said, we're at war, stupid. One of the kids, one of the guys sitting in the restaurant said, we're at war, stupid. I said, what are you talking about? He said, the Japanese, they've attacked Pearl Harbor. Well, did I sober up? I went out. I didn't even buy the hot dogs. I went out, got on my bicycle, went home, and I said, hey, turn the radio on. You know what? We're at war. The whole family was shocked. We said, what happened? I don't know. Turn the radio on. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor. I said, this is what for? I said, I don't know. But that night, you know, we had the radio on all the time. We heard more and more details and so on and so on. And then the next morning, we listened to Roosevelt's speech.
The Day of Infamy
He said,
speech.
yeah, last night, December 7th, 1941, a day which will go down in infamy. The Empire of Japan, the armed forces of the Empire of Japan, have deliberately, dastardly attacked on Pearl Harbor and so on and so on. And I ask the Congress to declare that a state of war exists between the United States and the Empire of Japan. And we will win the ultimate victory, so help my God. And we said, how old do you have to be? You know, my brothers and I were, especially my older brother, hey, we got to get in this, right? I said, yeah, but how old do you have to be? They said, 18. Well, my brother went to enlist, and he couldn't get in because when they asked him what he was doing, he was an electrician in the Elko boatyard. They were making torpedo boats. And they said, no, right now we need you right there. So we said, but do you need armed forces? Yeah, we got plenty of men for that. So he stayed. And of course, I was in school. But we had a physical education teacher named Lou Bernstein. And he said, boys, he said, instead of push-ups today, we're going to do close order drill. You might as well learn. It's not going to be long before you're going to be. And we started learning how to march and so on, right in high school. But it wasn't too hard an impact on us now. Once the war started and we started hearing things about how Americans are doing this and we're doing that, there wasn't a lot of, you know, it didn't seem like we were getting enough of the, you want to call it war propaganda, about what's really going on, what the Germans were doing and what the Japanese were doing. And those of us that were still in school, you know, were still really concerned about our grades and what are we going to do and so on and so on. And so I don't think, I'm trying hard to remember what my reaction was, but I don't think after the initial shock wore off that we weren't afraid, let's put it this way. We thought America would rally to the cause, and some of the guys were saying, hey, when our B-17E bombers get over there, in 3 months this war's going to be over.
Well, it wasn't a day or two after Pearl Harbor that Germany declared war on the United States, and I believe that Italy was right there afterwards.
Yes.
What was the reaction that you or the family had to know that, okay, now here we are, Italian Americans, proud to be Americans, but now we're at war with our home country?
But like I say, they clammed up. Here's the only thing my father said to me when I was leaving for the service. He said, non fai mai una cosa que me voy a calar la testa, which means just don't do anything to make me hang my head in shame. And I said, I won't pop you, Junior. He didn't say a word to me the rest of the way to the train station. He took me down there, he hugged me, and I went. But I remembered that all the way through the war. Would Pop be proud of this? Some of the things I did, Pop would not have been proud of, but I got caught up in the war too. At any rate, there was not a like political dilemma. Oh, people, is it going to be a problem to go fight the Germans and the Italians? Oh, hey, we are thoroughly Americans, and the enemy is out to get us, and we're going to get him before he gets us. And by the way, as soon as you get into the service, they had a series of propaganda films, Why We Fight. And they brought out all this stuff about what the Italians were doing, what the Germans were doing, and what the Russians were doing, and why we had to do this, and what the Japanese, and they had very, very, very good stuff. It was very convincing, and it really gave us the background to understand why we were there, what we were doing, and what we were going to do. And I, first had the child's approach that, hey, somebody's going to hit me, I'm going to hit him back. But as you learn more and you get a better education about the history of the events and so on, while you're training, hey, that gives you more of an incentive to really understand what's going on and to be a better soldier.
Mm. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking to you about what it was like while you were still in high school, but the war was going on, because I would imagine the mood of the country, you already suggested, it changed dramatically after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, but it changed in terms of, we got to collect aluminum now, and we got to get plant victory gardens and so on. But there was no pinch on anything. Rationing hadn't started right away and so on. I think for most people, but again, how can I talk for most people? For the people I knew, it was a bad, distant thing. It's not affecting us right now. We don't feel any pinch. There's nothing going on yet. The draft has just started, and by the way, it passed by one vote. The objective was still to get good grades and finish high school and so on. But some of us, and I know I was one of them, used to think about it and say, and of course we all want to be pilots, and I kept thinking about, I wore glasses when I was reading, and how I could do without the glasses and so on, because I don't think they'd take you with glasses or eyeglasses. But the thing doesn't hit you until you're actually ready to go. There's not an impact until you start seeing it around. Now, when my brother went, and when my brother-in-law went, and my other brother-in-law went, my sister's husbands are all gone, and I'm the only one left because I'm still 17 when I got out of high school, and I started CCNY. And your primary problem objective is, hey, you're in school here, finish up and get good grades and do what you have to do. But I joined the National Guard so that you could get some pre-training, that they gave you.
Was that still in high school that you did that?
Yes, you were allowed, if you were 16 and a half, I think, something like that. They lowered the age so that give the kids who are going to go in a year or two a little preparatory training, which didn't hurt at all. We had rifles, Springfield rifles, and we were taught how to shoot at the range. And so when we got into the service, we had some experience anyway. See, they were especially concerned about, the farm kids, hey, They're used to this kind of thing. They've been used to firearms and so on. City kid doesn't know the ball game, and we, you know, had no experience at all with weapons. Most of us didn't. However, you know, to try to recall what the mood was that you know, they were confident that you know, we were going to knock this war off in a year, come home as heroes.
Were you worried that it'd be over so quick you wouldn't be able to make the war?
Some of us did, yes. I was one that said, how come you can't volunteer? And they said, well, you're a student, you can't. You have to finish up the semester, whatever the story was. But by the way, by that time, we could see what was happening, you know. By 1942, Germany had taken half of Europe. By 1943, it was the heyday. The Japanese had most of Asia, and we said, hey, no, there's going to be plenty of war for us. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It looked bad.
I'm curious, from what I understand talking to you earlier, you graduated January of 1943? When did you graduate from high school?
January 1943, yes.
How was it that you graduated in the middle of the school year?
Okay, in those days in New York City, graduation was twice a year. In other words, today, when you start school, you have to be 6. If you're 5.5, you have to wait till you're 6 or so on. In those days, they had half-year semesters. You went to school from September to January, and then February to June. 2 regular semesters. Nowadays, you have annual semesters. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, and your courses ran 5-month courses. So if you were 5.5 or something, you could start school. And you were a half a year ahead of where you would be if you had to wait until the 6-year-old age to, however the thing worked out. And that's the way the whole school system was then in New York.
If there hadn't been the war going on, what do you think you would have wanted to do after you graduated from high school?
Oh, well, here's what the story was. In those days, there were academic high schools and vocational schools. And by the time you got out of elementary school, you had to make a decision as to which one you wanted to go to. If you said you wanted to go to an academic school, you had to take the battery of tests to get into that high school. If you said you wanted to go to vocational school, well, you just went there and selected your trade. Now, when it came time for me to do that, my brother was an electrician. I told you he was working for the electric boat company in New Jersey there on torpedo boats. He said, Vin, he said, take electricians. You'll graduate from the vocational school with a license. You'll be, you know, you take the regular subjects, English, history, and so on, but you also specialize in the trade. Half a day of all your day is learning the trade. And they taught plumbing, electrical work, aviation mechanics, plastering, you know, all the skills to get a good job. And so when it came time for me, I put down, I wanted to go to vocational school, and I wanted to go into electricity. My teachers sent a letter home. By the way, you know, your parents have to approve that, and so teachers sent a letter home. They said, Mr. Speranza, it would be a big mistake for Vincent to go to, he is definitely college material. He should go to an academic high school. My mother and father said, what are they talking about, academic high school? Who's going to send you to college? Who's going to pay for your college? We got nowhere to pay for college. Get a good job, and but my brother Joey turned around and he said, no, he said, listen, Pop, he said, somebody in the family's got to go to college, and he's got the best shot. I think we ought to let him go to the academic school. They said to me, "What do you think?" I said, "I don't care. Go get a job, but don't forget, if I go to an academic high school, then I got to go pay for college." They said, "Well, the family will do something. Don't worry about it. This is my brother." And he talked my parents into changing the thing and sent me to an academic high school. So I went to school where you had to take 4 years of English, 4 years of Latin, 3 years of another foreign language. I took French. I took Italian. 4 years of science, 2 years of biology, 2 years of physics, 4 years of mathematics. You know, all the kind of thing that you used to hear about what a classical education was. And they, you know, no fooling around in that school. And I was grateful for it, you know, to meet the challenge. And I graduated, you know, I did well. And I didn't have to worry about college right away because the war was on. And that's what the story was.
When did you actually enter the service, and how did you enter the service?
I went to the draft board when I turned 18. Now, I was 17 in March, which meant I graduated in January, February. A couple of more months, I would have been 18 after I graduated. I went to the draft board. I wanted to get in. I went to the draft board and I said, listen, I said, my parents will go berserk if I volunteer. I said, would you put my name at the top of the list, you know, and send it down? They said, oh, we can do that. Don't worry about it. So they said, fill out this application thing. So I started filling it out. And they said, you're a student? I said, yeah, I'm going to CCNY. They said, oh, we can't. You have to finish. The draft law will not permit you to, for us to pull you out in the middle of a semester. You got to finish the June semester, June.
So immediately you enrolled in CCNY after graduating from high school. How were you affording that?
It's free. CCNY is free.
Okay.
It was a free college. I took the exam. Again, my teachers while I was in elementary school told me to take this exam. And the exam was given, and by the way, I think, you know what the competition was for that thing? New York City, but, you know, the war had started and a lot of guys were gone. I guess I made it because the competition had lessened somewhat. I don't think I'm that good. But I qualified for CCNY, and it's free college. But by the way, you had to take military science in your first year. But whatever the story was, my draft papers didn't come till October, I think. October? Yeah, October, and or maybe they came a little earlier than that, but I didn't get I didn't get drafted until October, and I didn't go in until November.
Yeah, I know your paperwork showed that it was October 25th that you were inducted.
Right.
And that's November 15th that you entered active service.
Correct. November 15th. And you should see the advice I was getting. Everybody's saying, now, if they give you a choice, anything but the infantry, understand? I say, why? They say, because the infantry is where you get killed. They said, the Air Force, I said, they get killed there too. Yeah, but you got a clean bed and a place to eat and so on and so on. I said, the infantry lives in the mud. Everybody put thumbs down on don't go in the infantry. And I said, well, you know. To myself, I said, hey, listen, if you want to fight, that's where you got to go. But I didn't make a story of it. I kept saying, oh yeah, I took this advice, that advice. Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. And don't forget, they said, do good on the test for a radio. You become a radio man. In other words, if you get a skill in the Army, you get stripes. You know, you could make non-commissioned officer and so on. And they said, but don't tell them you went to college. Because if they you tell them you went to college, they'll pick you out for things like OCS and so on and so on. And second lieutenants get killed faster than anybody else in the Army and so on. But this is all, you know, I'm letting it go in one ear, not the other. But when it came time to make a choice, when I was inducted, they said, have you got a choice for branch of service? I said, yeah, I'd like to get in the Air Force. I'd like to be a pilot. And they looked at my physical again. They said, your eyes. And I said, well, then it doesn't matter. A good fighting outfit. And he said, but wait a minute. And they take out a file, because you had to take a battery of tests when you went in. And you sit down with this officer, and he goes, oh, Speranza, you radio aptitude, you did 97, you like radio? I said, yeah. Go to the next one. Oh, mechanical aptitude test and so on. You like tanks? I said, yeah. And he goes through a whole bunch of stuff about all these wonderful things. I qualified, and they take a big stamp, infantry. You know, that's what they needed at the time. All this other stuff is just motions they have to go through. And so I was sent to Camp Upton, New York, for induction. And, what was it, Camp Shanks? No, Camp Upton, I think. And I stayed there. You go through all the, you know, the physical inspections and more tests and calisthenics and so on. And then got shipped to Fort Benning, Georgia.
And is it Fort Benning then that you're going to go through basic training?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fort Benning for basic training. And
that had to be a really busy place at that time.
Oh my. And we were put up in tar paper shacks. You know, they were just putting up this stuff. The roof was just tar paper, and the sun hitting that tar paper. But I took to the training. I loved it. You know, the calisthenics every day, and then rifle training, and then the running and the jumping, and you know, I was a small guy, kind of compact, and I did well. Let's put it that way. In the training, I enjoyed it. You know, a lot of guys were bitching and complaining, but I said, hey. And they used to complain about the food. I thought that was the best food. We used to get eggs and bacon for breakfast. Hell, at home you got a bowl of bread and milk and coffee, and you know, in the early days, breakfast was nothing. Here we used to get bacon and eggs, and sometimes pancakes, and the meat, you know, at lunchtime, pork chops and so on. I thought the food was great in the Army. And
how about the classic stories of suddenly meeting all these farm kids from the South and kids from the Midwest and big city kids? And
you know, I just didn't have any trouble. I just reminded myself of when we were growing up, we were all bunches of kids from different places and so on, different colors, different religions. And I just never had any problem with, what should we say, adapting or getting along. In fact, I didn't smoke. This is after I got into the paratroops, parachute training. I didn't smoke, and everybody said, hey, Speranza, give me a cigarette. I don't smoke. Hey, Speranza, give me a cigarette. I don't smoke. Finally, in self-defense, I used to take my cigarette rations, and instead of giving them away to everybody, I put one in my pocket. So somebody, hey, Speranza, give me a cigarette. I could say, here's a cigarette. Well, I watched them. Well, let me put a connecting link in here. I did my infantry training. I got sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for advanced infantry training, and I was assigned to the 87th Infantry Division. That's the Acorn Division, green patch with a yellow acorn on it. And the Acorn Division was in advanced training. And one
was
morning,
this unit level training, platoon level, and company level training you were in?
no, it was a whole division. The
Okay.
82nd Airborne, the 87th Infantry Division. And they were going to go on maneuvers to Tennessee and then overseas from the scuttlebutt. You know, who knew what the story was. But while we were there, one morning they called us all out and they said, hey, everybody sit along these banks and so on. There's going to be a demonstration. Now this is regimental strength. There was a regiment. We're sitting all around there and we're sitting on the ground waiting. And all of a sudden, 3 C-47s come zooming over the sky. And when they get out there where we can see them, all of a sudden the doors open and parachute after parachute after parachute. Here these guys come flying on down and coming down to the ground. They roll over, pick up their parachutes, stick them in a bag, put it on the deck, double time off the field, and then line up in front of us. Brilliant shining boots, silver wings, pants bloused. Nobody else could do that at that time, by the way. Pants bloused into those jump boots and those jaunty caps and the attention. All big, beautiful guys. And they said, we're taking recruits for the parachute troops. Anybody here interested? You have to have had advanced infantry training, which I understand you all have. This is an officer talking to us. He said, and we're looking for a few good men. And we stopped thinking about it, and so on. He said, and there's $50 extra a month jump pay. A whole bunch of hands went up. You know, at the time, you got $50 a month. $50 a month, and those of us who wanted to help the families signed an allotment over to the parents. So $30 out of that comes out, and the Army added 20 to it and sent it to your parents to help the family out. And when you pay your laundry and so on, I used to, at the end of the month, I used to end up with $16 for the month. That's what I had to do whatever I wanted to do for a month. The $50 jump pay sounded real good, but also the glamour. Oh, those guys they looked. I couldn't wait. And so I ended up back in Fort Benning, Georgia. And Fort Benning, only this time it's parachute training. In the infantry, you walk every place. In the paratroops, you run every place. The infantry, you did 30-mile hikes. In the paratroops, you did 50-mile hikes. Every time you turned your eyeballs the wrong way, give me 50 push-ups. You didn't question, he tells you why. You didn't look me in the eye when I talked to you. When you finished the 50 push-ups, did you cheat or did you do 50? No, I did 50. Tell me, give me another 50 for not cheating when you had a chance. If you said you did 50, he'd say, give me another 50 anyway. Where are you from, soldier? New York. What a lousy state. Give me 50 push-ups for being from New York. Of course, they were building your back and your legs and your arms, and we were, what? I can't believe the shape we were in. You know, we were all 18, 19-year-old kids, and the training, and we used to take logs, 6 men to a log, and throw the logs to each other back and forth. Training was fantastic. I know we got to quit.
No, we got time.
No? All right. Well, the training on the ground, Fort Benning, Georgia, in the parachute unit had 2 towers. One was parachute towers. One had wires coming down so that the parachute is open, but it's guided. The ends of the parachute have rings on it. It's guided down the wires. Now you've done the jumping on the ground. You jump out of the fuselage on the ground and so on. You jump on that wire that's got a harness, and it bounces you down all the way down the field.
And that's all about learning how to roll once you hit the ground.
No, not yet. Not the wire. The wire is just getting you used to a harness and feeling the pull
Okay.
on you down there. Now, when you come to the jump towers, one of them, like I say, guides you just down. Just give you the feeling of coming down in a parachute. But the other one, no guide wires, and they turn it so that the wind is blowing this way, and your chute's already open, and you're in the harness, and then they let it go. And you just glide gently to the ground and roll, do the roll. You know, they taught you how to do it. Well, when I was a kid, Coney Island in New York had those parachute towers. I had already, when I got to those, I said, yeah, some of the guys, you know, jumping on the parachute, but I had no problem as a kid. We used to go up and down those things all the time at Coney Island. But at any rate, the day comes when, all right, now tomorrow you're going to make your first jump. Today you're going to pack the parachute you're going to jump in. So you never saw a more careful bunch of guys in your whole life. When we got to those parachute tables, this is my chute, and you fold it and you smooth it out and you measure. Yeah, it's supposed to be 32 feet, and you fold it all up, and you put your name on it, and the next morning, pick you up, take you out to the plains. Now, in training, a lot of people talk. Some don't. Some keep quiet, and, you know, but others, hey, what's there to it? So you jump out of a plane. Some of them are big talkers and froze in the door. Some of them were big talkers and did reason the door. Some of them were quiet, and you'd say, and some of the confident ones. But hey, here's where you separate the men from the boys. Now, everybody had the training. Everybody has been psyched up properly and so on. But now, you know, are you willing to throw yourself out of an airplane with a parachute and be ready to fight when you're on the ground? And that's the day I started smoking. Before you get on the plane, they said, the smoking lamp is out. And so everybody puts their cigarettes away. Right? They get on the plane, and now we're all sitting there like this on those metal seats, and your harness is tight and everything, and you keep checking all the buckles and things. And then he says, all right, the smoking lamp is on, and everybody pulls out a cigarette. And they're going, and I said, there must be something to this. Everybody looks like they're doing so. I pulled one of mine out, and I choked on it. But I was just puffing. I didn't know how to inhale. So I puffing on a cigarette. Before you know it, they said, all right, smoking lamps out. Everybody put the cigarettes out in the butt. Make sure you stamp the butt completely. And then it's stand up, hook up, equipment check. And the number 12 guy pats the number 11 guy in the back after he checked his equipment and said, 12 okay, 11 okay, 10 okay, 9 okay, all the way down. I think I was number 4 or 3 or something for the first flight. 4 okay. Remember, it may have cracked a little bit, but 4 okay. 3 okay, 2 okay, 1 okay. Stand in the door. Now you're saying, really? Am I? Of course, your training takes over. Slide it into the front and pay attention to your teachers. If you pay, I made 11 jumps, never had one bad jump, never even sprained an ankle, nothing, because I listened. I listened to what the teacher said. When the teacher said, when you go out that door, you make a half turn to the left, duck your head so the shroud lines don't hit your helmet, and count 1,000, 2,000. If your main chute hasn't opened by 3,000, pull this one. When I went out that door, and by the way, there's no getting used to it. Every time you jump, it's the same. I call it a thrill. Some people might call it something else. I don't know. But when I went out that door, and I made that half turn to the left, and I started dropping down. It's 32 feet. You shoot 32 feet, and the static line's another 30 feet. So you're down about 60 feet before the cord breaks, the propeller blast catches your chute, opens it, and you slide under it. And I remember that part so distinctly. And on the first jump, the prop blast opens your chute. You know, you look up and you say, check your canopy. That's another rule. Check your canopy, and you slide right down under it. And then you're up there. It's quiet. Coming down gently. And I never got over that and didn't want to. I said, parachute jumping is the nicest thing in the world. Of course, during combat, it's another ball game when they're shooting at you, but that's the nicest thing in the world. And we made our 4 jumps, and then the night jump, we had a tragedy. You jump Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Friday is the night jump, and you get your wings Saturday morning, if you're qualified. And at night, they teach you, if you're landing in trees, cross your legs and put both hands over your face so that the tree doesn't tear you apart. If you're landing over water, release your chute. Hang on to it until you're about 10 feet off the water, and then let it go so that you drop and the chute gets blown this way. Otherwise, it'll come over you and drown you. So that night that we jumped, there was a clear moon, and some guy thought he was over water. It was the concrete highway that in the moonlight, it looked like water. And he did what he was told, but again, he misjudged the distance. It's hard to look down and tell that to be, but he was much higher than he let go of the chute and splat. And of course, that made us all feel bad, but good that we had done it, you know. So, my OCS papers came through then. No, first I was assigned. Let's see, we finished jump training and was sent to, ready to go overseas. Oh, they send you home for 2 weeks. You get a 2-week furlough at home, and then you come back and get ready for shipment overseas as replacements. And I was with a whole bunch of guys on the Queen Mary. That's another whole story, but for another time. We'll pick that up.
Yeah, we are getting a little bit close. I got a couple questions about what it was like going through the training. And I've heard lots of stories about paratrooper training during the Second World War. And part of it was that there was a very high washout rate.
Absolutely. Here's what happened. They make a deal with you when you go in. These are the regulations. These are official regulations. You can quit anytime you want. Whenever you think you can't cut it, you can quit. Whenever we think you can't cut it, you're out. And the training, during the training, all officers lose their rank. All the trainers are buck sergeants. And sometimes it was very funny to see a colonel take a sergeant, grab a colonel by the seat of the pants and run him back up to them because the colonel fell out along the way and said, "Colonel, either you keep up or we're going to have to ship you back out." But we used to do 9-mile runs. There was 4.5 miles to this little town and 4.5 miles back. Every morning before breakfast, you take off your shirt and start the run. You run 8 minutes and you walk 2. And you run 8 and you walk 2. You run 8 and you walk 2. In other words, every 8 minutes there's a 2-minute walking. The rest of the time you're jogging. And you do 4.5 miles in, 4.5 miles back, and then you have breakfast. Put your shirt back on again and have breakfast. The training was difficult, and a lot of guys, for example, couldn't take the full field pack and the rifle and so on a 50-mile hike. And you had to do that, or you're washed out. There were a lot of people who, at the last minute, wouldn't jump. Just froze in the door. Can't do it. They pulled out.
Was there ever any question in your mind that you were going to make it?
I loved it from the beginning. I would have done anything to make sure I stayed in there. And you know, one of those young things that it captured my imagination. Imagine. The enemy is looking over there where the front lines are, and I'm going to be right behind, jump down there and take them on from all directions. You know, you have...
Last question for today then, Vince, because
Yeah.
we are up against the tyranny of the clock, I like
Yes.
to say. Was the camaraderie in going through that school and being a paratrooper, even at that time, did it feel different from the training you'd had up before that time?
Absolutely. In the paratroops, we were all volunteers. They were all people who wanted to be there, who wanted to be a paratrooper, who wanted to get the best training and be the best soldier he could. And we had a nice bunch of guys. I mean, they were really, you know, I thought first class. And now maybe some in combat turned out a little different, but I didn't know of any. I didn't know of any. The guys I had, and I told you, I found one of them still living in Wisconsin there, Steve Pente. I'll talk about him tomorrow. But it was, for me, it was, you know, coming home.
Vince, we got a lot more of your story to tell. We got to get you overseas. We got to get you through the Battle of Bastogne and on beyond that point. And by now, people, I'm sure, are fascinated to hear what else you've got to say. So we're looking forward to it, and we'll pick this up tomorrow. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you.